My name is Sam Fenton, and I used to think I had it all figured out. 41 years old, steady job as an IT manager at Consolidated Insurance, nice house in Maple Ridge with the white picket fence and everything. My wife Marta ran a successful design agency downtown. We had our routines, our weekend dinners, our shared Netflix queue. Life felt like a well-oiled machine, predictable and comfortable. I should have known that when things seem too perfect, they usually are. It started with small things. Marta working later than usual, claiming big projects with demanding clients. Her phone buzzing at odd hours with messages she'd quickly dismiss as work stuff. The way she'd shower immediately after coming home, even when she claimed to have been sitting in meetings all day. "You're being paranoid, Sam," she'd say with that laugh of hers, the one that used to make me feel like the luckiest guy alive. Now it just sounded hollow. My friend Greg from the security department at work would joke about it over beers. "All wives are mysterious, buddy. It's part of their charm." But Greg didn't see the way Marta's eyes would dart away when I asked about her day or how she'd started keeping her phone face down during dinner. The first real crack in my perfect world came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was getting ready for work when Marta's phone, charging on the kitchen counter, lit up with a text. The preview showed enough to make my stomach drop. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible." When I looked up, Marta was standing in the doorway, watching me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not guilt, not embarrassment. Calculation. "Work emergency," she said, snatching the phone. "Client's having a meltdown about the campaign." I nodded and smiled, playing along. But something had shifted. The comfortable routine we'd built over 8 years of marriage suddenly felt like an elaborate performance, and I was starting to suspect I was the only one who didn't know the script had changed. Over the next few weeks, I started paying attention in ways I never had before. Marta's girls' nights with her best friend Ashley became more frequent. Her work clothes got more expensive, more revealing. She started going to a new gym across town instead of our neighborhood one. "I need a change of scenery," she explained when I asked about it. "The old place was getting boring." The way she said boring made me wonder what else in her life had earned that label. I'm not proud of what I did next, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Using my IT skills, I set up a simple tracking app on our shared tablet, the one Marta sometimes used for work presentations. Nothing illegal, nothing invasive. Just location data for our family account. What I found made my hands shake as I stared at the screen. While Marta claimed to be at the gym, her location showed a luxury apartment complex downtown. The same complex where, according to a quick online search, one Colin Drake kept a penthouse. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Colin Drake, I knew that name from Marta's work stories. Real estate investor, recently divorced, the kind of guy who wore expensive suits and drove cars that cost more than most people's houses. Marta had mentioned him a few times, always in the context of potential business partnerships. Now I understood what kind of partnership they'd really been discussing. The confirmation came in the cruelest way possible. I was working late in my home office when I heard Marta on the phone in the kitchen, her voice low and intimate in a way she hadn't used with me in months. "I know it's complicated, Colin, but Sam doesn't suspect anything. He's too caught up in his little computer world to notice what's happening right under his nose." The laughter that followed was like a slap across the face. My wife, the woman I'd built a life with, was discussing my obliviousness with her lover like it was the punchline to a joke. I sat there in the dark, listening to her make plans for another work dinner, and felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. If Marta thought I was too dumb and distracted to notice her betrayal, she was about to learn just how wrong she could be. But I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I'd spent my career solving problems methodically, step by step, and this was just another problem that needed a systematic solution. Marta wanted to play games? Fine. But she was about to discover that in any game, the person who knows the rules has a significant advantage over the person who thinks they're making them up as they go along. I opened my laptop and started taking notes. The moment that transformed me from a clueless husband into something else entirely happened on a Thursday morning in April. Marta was rushing around the kitchen, grabbing her purse and keys, when her phone chimed with a text message. She glanced at it, typed back quickly, then looked at me with that practiced smile I was learning to recognize. "Shopping all day with Ashley," she announced, not quite meeting my eyes. "We'll be home late." I watched her for a moment, noting the designer dress I'd never seen before, the expensive perfume that definitely wasn't the one I'd bought her for Christmas. Then I picked up my own phone and typed back a response that surprised even me with its coldness. To tell Ashley's husband I said hi. The effect was immediate and devastating. Marta's face went pale, her keys clattered to the floor, and for the first time in months I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" she stammered. "Just being friendly," I replied, taking a sip of my coffee like nothing had happened. "You two spend so much time together, I figured you must be close with her whole family." Marta stared at me for another few seconds, then grabbed her keys and practically ran out the door. She was back within 20 minutes, breathless and empty-handed. No shopping bags, no Ashley, no believable explanation for why her all-day plans had suddenly evaporated. That's when I knew for certain that my marriage was over. The only question now was how it was going to end. I started making preparations that very day. First, I transferred our joint savings into a separate account under my name. Perfectly legal since both our names were on the original account, and I made sure to document everything for potential future proceedings. Next, I called in a favor from Greg at work. His security company did background checks for corporate clients, which meant he had access to databases most people never knew existed. "I need you to look into someone for me," I told him over lunch. "Colin Drake, real estate investor, lives downtown." Greg raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. That's what I liked about him. "Give me a couple days?" While I waited, I started paying closer attention to Marta's patterns. She was getting sloppy, probably because she thought her stupid husband was too wrapped up in his little computer world to notice anything. She'd leave her phone unlocked while showering, forget to clear her browser history, take calls in the next room like I couldn't hear every word. The picture that emerged was worse than I'd imagined. Colin wasn't just some random affair. He was wealthy, connected, and apparently very good at convincing married women to leave their husbands. According to the text messages I glimpsed, he'd done this before. "Sam's such a boring little man," I read in one exchange that made my jaw clench. "He thinks a big night out is dinner at Applebee's and a movie. You deserve so much better." The response from Marta was even worse. "I know. I've been settling for mediocre for too long. Can't wait to start our real life together." Our real life. 8 years of marriage, and apparently none of it had been real to her. That's when I decided that if Marta wanted excitement, if she was bored with her mediocre husband, I was going to give her more excitement than she'd bargained for. Greg came through with Colin's information faster than I'd expected. The man had quite a history. 2 previous divorces, both messy, a reputation for flashy spending and questionable business practices. Most interesting of all, he was currently married to a woman named Jessica, who apparently had no idea about his extracurricular activities. "This guy's a real piece of work," Greg told me, sliding a folder across the table. "But he's also careless. Leaves digital footprints everywhere. If you're thinking what I think you're thinking, you've got plenty to work with." I was thinking exactly what he thought I was thinking. That night, I waited until Marta was asleep, then went through her phone with the thoroughness of a forensic investigator. What I found was a complete record of her affair, going back 3 months. Hotel receipts, restaurant reservations, even photos that made my stomach turn. But it wasn't just evidence of betrayal, it was evidence of planning. Marta and Colin weren't just having an affair, they were planning a future together, one that involved her leaving me and taking as much of our shared assets as possible. "Sam will never see it coming," read one message. "He's too trusting. By the time he realizes what's happening, we'll be long gone." I stared at that message for a long time, feeling something dark and determined settle in my chest. Marta was right about one thing. I was trusting. I'd trusted her with my heart, my home, my future. But she was wrong about everything else. I wasn't going to be blindsided. I wasn't going to be the clueless husband who gets left with nothing but debt and humiliation. I was going to be the husband who fought back. The next few weeks were like living in a spy movie, except the stakes were my entire life. I became a different person, someone calculating and methodical, someone who could smile at his wife over breakfast while secretly documenting every lie she told. Marta made it almost too easy. She'd gotten so comfortable in her deception that she barely bothered to cover her tracks anymore. Phone calls with Colin while I was supposedly absorbed in work, credit card statements showing purchases at stores she claimed never to have visited, calendar entries for client meetings that lined up perfectly with Colin's own schedule. I started carrying a small digital recorder, the kind journalists use. Nothing illegal about recording conversations in my own home, and Marta had developed a habit of taking her calls on speaker when she thought I was out of earshot. "Jessica's getting suspicious," I heard Colin say during one particularly revealing conversation. She asked about the charges on our joint credit card. I told her it was business entertainment. "We need to be more careful," Marta replied. "Sam's been acting strange lately, more attentive, asking more questions." "Cold feet?" Colin's voice carried a mocking tone that made my hands clench into fists. "No way. I'm done with this suburban prison. I want the life you promised me, Colin. The penthouse, the trips to Europe, the freedom to be myself instead of some boring housewife." Boring housewife. 8 years of marriage, and that's how she saw herself. Not as my partner, not as the woman I'd worked overtime to support while she built her business, but as a prisoner serving time until someone better came along. That conversation gave me an idea. If Marta wanted freedom, if she was so miserable in our suburban prison, maybe I should help her achieve her dreams. Just not in the way she expected. I reached out to Jessica Drake through social media, using a fake account I'd created for the purpose. It wasn't hard to find her. Colin's wife was active on Instagram, posting pictures of their expensive lifestyle, their luxury vacations, their perfect marriage. Getting her attention was even easier. I sent her a simple message. "I think we need to talk about our spouses." She responded within an hour. "Who is this?" "Someone whose wife is having an affair with your husband. Are you free for coffee?" The meeting was set for the next day at a small cafe across town, somewhere neither of our spouses would think to look. Jessica turned out to be nothing like I'd expected. Where I'd imagined a pampered trophy wife, I found a sharp, intelligent woman who'd clearly been harboring her own suspicions. "I knew something was going on," she told me, stirring her coffee with mechanical precision. "Colin's been different for months, more secretive, more defensive. When I found hotel receipts in his jacket, he claimed they were for out-of-town clients." I slid a folder across the table. "Your husband's been busy." Jessica's face went through a series of expressions as she looked through the photos and documents I'd compiled. Surprise, hurt, anger, and finally, something cold and determined that I recognized because I'd been seeing it in my own mirror. "What do you want to do about this?" she asked. "I want them to face consequences for what they've done. Real consequences, not just a quiet divorce and a fresh start somewhere else." Jessica smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "I like the way you think. Colin's always been too clever for his own good. Maybe it's time someone reminded him that he's not as smart as he thinks he is." We spent the next 2 hours planning. Jessica, it turned out, had been a paralegal before her marriage. She knew exactly how to document evidence, how to protect assets, and most importantly, how to make sure that when the hammer fell, it would fall hard. "The key is timing," she explained. "We need to let them get comfortable, maybe even a little careless. Let them think they're winning right up until the moment we pull the rug out from under them." Over the following week, Jessica and I became unlikely allies, sharing information and coordinating our efforts. She confirmed that Colin had been bragging about his new girlfriend to his friends, describing Marta as a real upgrade from his previous conquests. Meanwhile, I continued my surveillance of Marta, who was becoming bolder by the day. She'd started staying out entire nights, claiming work emergencies that supposedly required her to sleep at the office. When I drove by her agency at midnight, the building was dark and empty. The breaking point came when I found a real estate listing in Marta's browser history. A luxury condo downtown, the kind of place that cost more per month than most people made in a year. She'd been looking at floor plans, neighborhood information, even furniture catalogs. They weren't just planning to leave their spouses. They were planning to do it in style, using money they'd taken from the marriages they were destroying. That's when I decided it was time to move from surveillance to action. My first real move against Marta and Colin was subtle but devastating. I'd learned from years in IT that the most effective attacks are often the ones the target doesn't see coming until it's too late. I started with their communication. Using techniques I'd picked up from cybersecurity training, I managed to clone Marta's phone when she left it unattended during one of her marathon showers. Nothing illegal, just accessing data from a device in my own home. What I found was a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. Not just text messages and photos, but detailed plans for their future together. They'd already picked out wedding rings, planned a honeymoon in Italy, even discussed how they'd split the assets from their respective divorces. "Sam's so predictable," read one message from Marta. "He'll probably just roll over and accept whatever settlement I offer. He's too nice for his own good." Too nice. That was about to change. My first strike was surgical and perfectly legal. I contacted both of their employers anonymously, sending carefully edited recordings of their phone conversations. Nothing that violated privacy laws, just evidence of them using company resources for personal business, conducting affairs during work hours, and in Colin's case, bragging about manipulating clients. The effect was immediate. Marta came home that Friday in a state of barely controlled panic. "Someone's been spreading rumors about me at work," she announced, pacing around the kitchen like a caged animal. Price called me into her office and asked about my relationship with clients. She seemed to think I was mixing business with pleasure. I looked up from my laptop with practiced concern. That's terrible, honey. Do you have any idea who might have said something? It has to be someone jealous of my success. Maybe one of the other designers. She was lying smoothly, but I could see the fear in her eyes. The worst part is, they seem to have specific information, times, dates, even conversations. Maybe you should be more careful about who you talk to, I suggested mildly. Marta stared at me for a moment, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. But she couldn't quite bring herself to believe that her boring, predictable husband was capable of the kind of calculated revenge she was experiencing. Colin wasn't handling the pressure as well. According to Jessica, he'd come home ranting about corporate spies and invasion of privacy. His real estate firm had received similar anonymous tips about his conduct, and several major clients had suddenly decided to take their business elsewhere. He's starting to crack, Jessica reported during one of our coffee meetings. Last night he accused me of hiring a private investigator. I just smiled and told him that if he had nothing to hide, he shouldn't be worried. But I wasn't done. The anonymous tips were just the opening move. My real plan was much more comprehensive. Using public records and social media, I'd compiled a complete picture of Colin's business practices. The man was successful, but he cut corners and bent rules in ways that wouldn't stand up to serious scrutiny. A few well-placed calls to regulatory agencies, backed up with documentation, started an avalanche of official investigations. At the same time, I began reaching out to their social circle. Not directly, of course. I created fake social media profiles and began sharing information in ways that looked like gossip rather than deliberate sabotage. Did you hear about Marta Fenton? Read one post in a local neighborhood group. Apparently she's been having quite the social life lately. My friend saw her at that expensive hotel downtown with some guy who definitely wasn't her husband. The responses were immediate and brutal. Small communities thrive on gossip, and Marta had made herself a target by flaunting her affair so openly. Within days, the whispers started. At the grocery store, the gym, even at our local coffee shop, people were talking about Marta and Colin. Not openly, but in the way that's somehow worse. The sideways glances, the conversations that stopped when she walked by, the sudden coolness from friends who'd heard the rumors. Marta tried to brazen it out at first, but I could see the strain wearing on her. She'd always cared deeply about her reputation, her image as a successful, sophisticated woman. Now that image was crumbling, and she had no idea how to stop it. People are being so strange lately, she complained one evening. Ashley's been avoiding my calls, and 3 clients have suddenly decided to postpone their projects. Maybe it's just a coincidence, I suggested, not looking up from my tablet. This many coincidences? I don't think so. She sat down across from me, and for a moment she looked like the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, uncertain, almost ready to confess. Then her phone buzzed with a text from Colin, and the moment passed. I'm going out, she announced, grabbing her purse. Don't wait up. As soon as her car left the driveway, I opened my laptop and began planning my next move. If Marta thought the rumors and professional pressure were bad, she had no idea what was coming next. The real war was just beginning. 2 weeks into my campaign against Marta and Colin, I decided it was time to get more direct. They'd both started looking over their shoulders, jumping at shadows, but they still hadn't connected their problems to me. In their minds, I remained the oblivious husband, too wrapped up in my boring life to notice what was happening right under my nose. That was about to change. I started with Colin's car, a flashy red sports car that he parked in the same spot every day outside his office building. Nothing destructive, nothing that would bring the police into it, just a simple message that someone was watching. Every morning for a week, I left a different note under his windshield wiper. Nice car. Shame if something happened to it. Your wife called. She knows. Smile. You're being watched. According to Jessica, the notes were driving him crazy. He'd installed a security camera pointed at his parking spot, hired a security guard to patrol the area, even considered trading in the car for something less conspicuous. He's convinced it's one of his business rivals, Jessica told me, barely containing her laughter. He spent an hour yesterday lecturing me about industrial espionage and corporate warfare. While Colin was focused on protecting his precious car, I turned my attention to Marta's social media presence. She'd always been active online, posting carefully curated photos of her perfect life, her successful business, her happy marriage. I began leaving comments on her posts, using fake accounts I'd created for the purpose. Nothing obviously threatening, just questions that made other people start wondering. Great photo. Is that the same hotel where you had your business meeting last week? Love your dress. Wasn't Colin Drake wearing a similar color at that restaurant downtown? Such a cute couple. Oh wait, that's not your husband, is it? The comments were subtle enough that Marta couldn't complain about harassment, but obvious enough that her friends and followers started paying attention. Within days, her comment sections became battlegrounds between people defending her and people asking uncomfortable questions. Marta's response was to delete the comments and block the accounts, but I had dozens of fake profiles ready to go. Every time she thought she'd solved the problem, new comments would appear, new questions would be asked. The psychological pressure was exactly what I'd hoped for. Marta became obsessed with monitoring her online presence, spending hours each day deleting comments and blocking accounts. Her work began to suffer as she focused more on damage control than actual business. But my masterpiece was yet to come. I'd discovered that Colin and Marta had planned a romantic weekend getaway at a luxury resort 2 hours outside the city. They thought they were being clever, booking separate rooms to maintain plausible deniability, but their credit card records told the real story. Instead of trying to stop them, I decided to join them. I booked my own room at the same resort, using a fake name and paying cash. Then I spent the week before their trip preparing a special surprise. The resort had a beautiful outdoor restaurant that overlooked the lake, the kind of place where wealthy couples went to see and be seen. Colin had made reservations for Saturday night, probably planning some grand romantic gesture to convince Marta to leave me once and for all. I arrived at the resort Friday afternoon and spent the evening scouting locations and timing. Everything had to be perfect. Saturday night, I watched from across the restaurant as Colin and Marta shared their romantic dinner. They looked so happy, so confident in their secret affair, so certain that they'd outsmarted everyone around them. That's when I made my move. I'd hired a photographer, telling him I wanted to surprise my friends with candid photos of their anniversary dinner. The photographer was professional and discreet, capturing dozens of high-quality images of Colin and Marta holding hands, kissing, feeding each other dessert. But the photos were just the beginning. As Colin and Marta walked back to their rooms, I intercepted them in the hotel corridor. The look on their faces when they saw me was worth every moment of planning. "Sam," Marta gasped, her face going white. "What are you doing here?" "Funny story," I replied, keeping my voice calm and friendly. I was having dinner downstairs when I could have sworn I saw my wife with another man, but that couldn't be right, because my wife told me she was at a business conference in Chicago. Colin stepped forward, trying to look intimidating. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Oh, I don't think so." I held up my phone, showing them one of the photos the photographer had taken. "This is pretty clear, don't you think?" For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Marta tried to salvage the situation with the same manipulative charm she'd been using on me for months. "Sam, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I scrolled through more photos. "Because it looks like my wife is having an affair with a married man. It looks like she's been lying to me for months while planning to destroy our marriage. But please, explain how I'm misunderstanding the situation." That's when Colin made his biggest mistake. Instead of trying to diffuse the situation, he got aggressive. "Look, buddy, your marriage was over long before I came along. Marta deserves better than some small-time computer nerd who can't even keep his wife satisfied." I smiled at him, and something in my expression made him take a step back. "You're absolutely right, Colin. Marta does deserve better. She deserves a husband who pays attention, who notices things, who doesn't just roll over when someone tries to destroy his life." I held up my phone again, but this time it wasn't showing photos. It was showing a live stream to social media, broadcasting our conversation to hundreds of viewers. She deserves a husband who fights back. The live stream was the beginning of the end for Marta and Colin, but I wasn't finished with them yet. The video went viral within hours, shared across social media platforms by friends, neighbors, and complete strangers who'd been following the drama. By Sunday morning, everyone in our social circle had seen the footage of Colin calling me a small-time computer nerd, while my wife stood beside him, unable to deny their affair. The comments section was brutal, with people I'd known for years expressing their shock and support. But Marta and Colin's humiliation was just getting started. I'd spent months preparing for this moment, and I had one final surprise that would ensure they never forgot the consequences of their betrayal. On Monday morning, while Marta was at work trying to salvage her professional reputation, I put the final phase of my plan into motion. I'd discovered that Colin had been using his real estate connections to help Marta hide assets, transferring money into accounts I wasn't supposed to know about. What they didn't realize was that I'd been documenting everything, building a comprehensive case that painted them both as calculating manipulators who'd planned to defraud me in our divorce. I walked into Colin's office building at exactly 2 p.m., carrying a briefcase full of evidence and wearing the most expensive suit I owned. I'd called ahead and scheduled a meeting with his business partners, claiming to have information about irregularities in their company's practices. The conference room was full when I arrived. Colin's partners, several major clients, even a reporter from the local business journal who'd been investigating rumors about the company. Colin walked in 5 minutes later, expecting a routine business meeting. When he saw me sitting at the head of the conference table, his face went through a series of expressions that I'll remember for the rest of my life. "Gentlemen," I began, opening my briefcase. "I'm here to discuss Colin Drake's extracurricular activities and how they've been affecting his professional judgment." What followed was the most satisfying hour of my life. I laid out everything methodically, professionally, like the IT presentation I'd given hundreds of times before. The affair, the financial manipulation, the way Colin had been using company resources to support his lifestyle. But the real bombshell came when I revealed the recordings I'd made of Colin bragging to his friends about his conquests, describing his affairs as business investments, and joking about how easy it was to manipulate desperate housewives. The room went silent as Colin's own voice filled the air, describing Marta as another bored suburban wife looking for excitement and claiming that he could have her eating out of my hand within a month. Colin tried to object, to claim the recordings were fake or taken out of context, but I had too much evidence. Photos, financial records, witness statements from hotel staff who'd seen them together. By the time I finished my presentation, Colin's business partners were looking at him like he was a stranger. The reporter was taking notes furiously, and Colin himself looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "I think we've heard enough," said the senior partner finally. "Colin, we'll need to discuss your future with this firm." I packed up my briefcase and walked out, leaving Colin to face the consequences of his actions. But I wasn't done yet. My final stop was Marta's office, where I found her in an emergency meeting with her boss and the other partners in her agency. Word of the morning's events had already reached them, along with copies of the evidence I'd presented. Marta looked up as I entered the conference room, and for the first time since this whole mess began, I saw real fear in her eyes. "Hello, darling," I said, taking a seat at the table. "I hope you don't mind me joining your meeting. I thought you might want to hear about my conversation with Colin's business partners." What followed was even more devastating than the scene at Colin's office. I presented evidence of how Marta had been using her company's resources to support her affair, conducting personal business during work hours, even stealing client contacts to help Colin's real estate ventures. But the final blow came when I played a recording of Marta describing her colleagues as small-minded provincials and claiming that she was too good for this pathetic little agency. Her boss, Ms. Price, listened to the entire presentation with the expression of someone watching a train wreck in slow motion. When I finished, she turned to Marta with cold professionalism. "I think it's best if you clean out your office today, Marta. We'll discuss the terms of your departure with our lawyers." I stood up to leave, but Marta grabbed my arm. "Sam, please, we can work this out. It doesn't have to end like this." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. For 8 years, I'd loved this woman, trusted her, built my life around her. Now she was just another problem I'd solved. "You're right, Marta. It didn't have to end like this. You chose to make it end like this the moment you decided I was too boring, too predictable, too nice to notice what you were doing." I gently removed her hand from my arm and walked toward the door. "Enjoy your new life with Colin. I'm sure you'll be very happy together." As I left the building, my phone was already buzzing with calls from reporters, lawyers, and friends who'd seen the social media explosion. By evening, the story had made the local news, complete with footage from my live stream and interviews with people who'd known Colin and Marta. I sat in my living room, watching the coverage with a beer in my hand and a smile on my face. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the betrayed husband, not the clueless victim, but Sam Fenton, the guy who solved problems and got things done. My phone rang, and Jessica's name appeared on the screen. "I saw the news," she said when I answered. "That was quite a performance today." "Just getting started," I replied. "How's Colin handling his newfound fame?" "Not well. He's been calling lawyers all afternoon, trying to find someone who'll take his case. Apparently most of the good ones have conflicts of interest." We talked for a few more minutes, comparing notes on our respective spouses' reactions to their public exposure. Jessica had filed for divorce that morning, armed with enough evidence to ensure she'd get everything she was entitled to and more. As for Marta, she'd apparently spent the afternoon packing her things and moving out of our house. She'd left her keys on the kitchen counter along with a note claiming that I'd destroyed everything good between us and that she'd never forgive me for this humiliation. I crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash. After everything she'd done, everything she'd planned to do, she still thought she was the victim in this story. But that was her problem now, not mine. I raised my beer in a toast to the empty house, to my new life, to the satisfaction of a job well done. Marta had been right about one thing. I was predictable. She just hadn't predicted the right thing. She'd expected me to be the nice guy who got taken advantage of, who rolled over and accepted whatever scraps she was willing to throw him. Instead, she got the guy who fought back, who turned her own weapons against her, who made sure that everyone knew exactly what kind of person she really was. The last laugh, as it turned out, was mine.